long ago, and I remember in the west of Ireland myself, you'd sit around the fire of a night, and the house in which people gathered normally had a character. That was one of the reasons why they gathered around the house, and there would be song and there would be stories. So in order to try and recreate that atmosphere just a little bit, we are up against it, because back in West Clare where I grew up, there would have been a stone floor, a half door, and a turf fire with a crook in it. These are slightly more salubrious surroundings we're in at the moment. And of course, everybody would know everybody around the fire. So in order to try and create the atmosphere and relax things a little bit for the contestants, I would like you to turn to somebody on your left, on your right, particularly if you don't know them, and say something nice like, "Jesus, this thing rain yesterday," or exchange some little greeting, and do that for the next minute or two. Just say hello to each other. Yeah.
I will sing to you of a lovely place. It is there I long to be. It is where I spent my youthful days, in merriment and glee. His calling fair, I do declare, it is with them I will go.
We just asked the audience for a title, and that will be the inspiration for our story. So, do you think you can live up to that expectation?
Because we have a very high expectation. Because this is Ireland, the land of stories, and we're from Holland, where, well, as we told the children, we don't have any stories.
We don't have any stories in Holland.
That's why we make them up on the spot. So we'll be looking for a very good title.
Going home. Very good. Thank you very much.
So come to the wine mill and kick up some fun at the rattle of Mike Connell's ass. Oh, we drank beer and whiskey the whole blessed night till we couldn't stoop down for our glass. What an elegant night at the wine mill we had at the rattle of Mike Connell's ass.
They're very sharp-tongued in Cork City, especially the pals. There was this girl, and she was talking, the pal was talking to the girl, you know, and she was saying, "Geez, Mary, I was just looking at you, dear. You're getting very wrinkly around the eyes. You're getting very kind of old looking. Very old looking. You're getting very kind of, dear. And he wants us, "They're not wrinkles, girl. They're laughter lines." And he wants us, "Geez, Mary, there's nothing that funny."
Some months back, when we got all of the long list, we were both sent a parcel of CDs, tapes, downloads, MP3 stuff. Like, you need to have the skills of somebody working for NASA Control to deal with all the different formats that the stories came in, DVDs as well, the whole lot. And it was a very difficult job to pick 4 finalists.
I am what they call an unclaimed treasure. And, you know, when you haven't a ring on your finger, people think you were never asked. But I am here to tell you, I have been round the block. I had my moments.
My story takes place on the wildly beautiful island of Cape Clear. Now, you must understand, Cape Clear is, in the family of Ireland, the mad cousin. The one who dances with everyone at the wedding, drinks until he could bleed whiskey, and still wakes up fresh as a daisy the following morning. The island has a population of around 100 or so. It's a well-lubricated population. There are 3 pubs on the island. And the norm is that you don't set out for the Chathtorna until around midnight. So, not being one to break with the status quo, I set out from my lodgings one evening as the clock was pushing for 12. As I made my way down the hill towards Kieran Mike's, I noticed that the shadows were growing murkier and that the light from the fastnet was being smothered by the night. I was nervously feeling my way along the boreen when suddenly, rising out of the road before me, came a slavering hellhound, and it was straining at its leash. The devil himself was holding it. Laughing, the long fellow let loose the hound, and it came bounding towards me. It braced itself, muscles rippling, and then it leapt from my throat, ready to tear the life from me. Now I was determined to go down fighting, so I leapt forward and roared my battle cry.
I went into my bank and I said, any chance of a small mortgage for a small house with maybe a small shed out the back? We don't do things like that, he said. We only do big mortgages for 2 or more big F-off houses. Use your head, he said, think like a banker. What? Get 20 beds, throw them into a house with 20 Polish fellas and 20 of their sisters. They'll pay the mortgage for you. Use your head, cop yourself on, think like a banker. What? I do not want to think like a banker, I said. And I do not want to live like a vampire. If I was a vampire, I'd retire. I'd be like Brad Pitt. I'd live in a chicken shack. I'd suck on rats, but I don't want to be a vampire, active or retired. I came in here, I said, looking for a small mortgage for a small house with maybe a small shed. Well, I've changed my mind. I don't want the shed. Heaven forbid, I said, I'd wake up some morning, look out the back and find Brad Pitt living in my shed with vampires, sucking on rats.
Jimmy Norton worked for Wicklow County Council, and when one particular road widening project was completed, Jimmy became redundant. Needless to say, Jimmy didn't use the word redundant. He threw in a few expletives and he said, the council doesn't want me anymore. When he was let go, he didn't upskill, as they would say nowadays, but he was in a position to get further employment. He was the owner of a few basic tools, such as a hammer, a chisel, and a trowel. Now, when I say he had a trowel, I must point out that he wasn't a bricklayer. He could do a bit of roof, sometimes dog roof work, but there'd be no point in telling Jimmy that you wanted Flemish bond, stretcher bond, or even herringbone design in your brick wall. And he wouldn't be over familiar with the Pythagoras theorem. But he could put one stone on top of the other and keep the resulting structure parallel with the perpendicular, more or less.
We judged each story as a story, you know, beginning, middle and end, easy to follow, wide appeal, you know, acceptability, whatever. We also assessed each teller on how the audience reacted, how the audience bought into the story, you know, how they went along with the storyteller, how the storyteller maybe fed off the audience. Because different to a theatrical performance or an actor, a storyteller has to look his audience in the eye, see how they're reacting, and maybe feed a bit off that. Also, just the actual performance, say use of voice, volume, energy, movement, gestures, all of that sort of thing. And our fourth criterion was just entertainment value. You know, were we and was the audience entertained? Would you come back again? Who was more entertaining than the other? That's how we judged it.
There can only be but one winner, and the winner is Killian Brennan. Can I ask Killian to come forward?